Amanda, can you reshare the slides, please?
We're good?
Sounds good. Looks good.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
We'll get started in just one moment. Is Miss Smiley here? I'm trying to make sure everyone is here before we get going.
Yes, I
I
am.
see her.
Oh, there you are. Okay, I'm trying to get everything formatted on my monitor so I can see everything. Admission control. Okay. Good evening. Tonight is Monday, January 25th, and I'm calling this board meeting to order. Ms. Moore isn't feeling well this evening, and she sends her regrets for not being able to attend tonight. Orange County Schools Board of Education pledges to our families, students, staff, and the greater community to conduct our business in a courteous and productive manner, showing respect for fellow board members, staff, and citizens. The board asks the citizens to conduct themselves with the same courtesy towards all staff members and each other. As per board policy, Robert's Rules of Order will be used to conduct meetings, and a moment of silence will be observed before we begin our business. It will be held this evening after staff presentations for agenda items before the main discussion by the board. Tonight, let's begin by acknowledging that Orange County Schools educates our students on the traditional land of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation. As we collaborate this evening, may we honor our past while recognizing our individual roles and helping meet the needs of every student and family in our district. We will now have a moment of silence. Thank you for that. Do I have a motion to adopt tonight's revised agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion from Ms. Smiley. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Atherton. Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yeah.
Our revised agenda has been approved. We added a conversation, we removed a conversation about student achievement, which we will have at the next board meeting on February 8th. And we added a vote about students eating meals in classrooms tonight, just so that those watching know what the revised agenda means. Do I have a motion to adopt tonight's consent agenda with the personnel report as revised in closed session?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Stevens and a second from Mr. Atherton. Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens? Okay, I saw you say yes. Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Our consent agenda unanimously passes. I just want to mention tonight that we are trying a new concept where some of our reports are pre-recorded and they are available to the public in the agenda materials from our board notification page. Staff will, speak to them briefly, but the full presentation can be viewed within the agenda tonight. So with that, we will move on to our first item, which is Plan B updates. Dr. Felder?
All right, hold on one second here. There we go. All right, so thank you and good evening, Chair McKenzie, Vice Chair Stevens, the entire board, students and families. Tonight, we have several agenda items. The outcomes for those agenda items are listed on this slide. And so by the end of tonight's meeting, board members will have had an opportunity to discuss Plan B update items. Again, those that Mrs. McKenzie referenced that were pre-recorded via video and can be found on Assembly. So they're posted for everyone's consumption, as well as would have had an opportunity to receive information about K-1 hybrid students return to school. The board will have had an opportunity to take action on meals in classrooms, as well as budget items related to Plan B, specifically after school and supervised learning lab fees. Additionally, the board will have an opportunity to hear about the findings from the school names research. And lastly, board will have had an opportunity to take action on a number of items, a resolution for Dr. Corbett, the 21-22 student discretionary transfer options. This too was presented to the board via a pre-recorded video. And last but not least, there are a few policy committee recommendations related to human resources. So those are our outcomes for tonight. Any questions about any of that? All right, I will take that as a no and keep moving. So next slide, please. Well, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then the pictures on the next 5 slides speak volumes. To date, approximately 500 kindergarten and first grade students have opted for Plan B hybrid. That's both remote and in person on alternating weeks. This journey back to school began for our kindergartners with their orientations held on January 12th and 13th and January 19th and 20th. Then today was the big day. Today, our kindergarten and first grade students, our hybrid students in cohort A, had their very first official day of in-person learning. Both the orientation and the first day of in-person learning for our kinders and first graders were around a rousing success. I want to personally thank the board and every single teacher, teaching assistant, custodian, bus driver, child nutrition service worker, screener, office staff, assistant principal, central office staff, and all other staff, as well as our families, even the students themselves, who all worked so hard for so long to ensure that we had plans that were safe and plans that allowed for an excellent day of learning for these students today. So again, a big round of applause to all of you, and thank you so very, very much. I also want to take this opportunity to just remind everyone that this still remains an evolving situation. So families, I know that this was shared in messages communicated to you by your principals, but again, want to remind everyone that plans change literally on a dime. So please, please have contingency plans ready, have them in place just in case there's a need to pivot back to 100% remote learning for our kindergarten and first grade students. Thank you. So let's take a look at the pictures. Oh, you have already. Okay. Well, that's great. All right. Working from 2 slide decks here, so bear with me. All right. So with regards to Plan B updates, I'm going to kick off with a few updates as of today, January 25th. And then we'll punt to Dr. Dawson, Deputy Superintendent, who will begin the discussion of those items that were provided pre-recorded. So again, as of today, cohort 1 of our kindergarten and hybrid in-person remote students returned today. The students in the year-round calendar, they will return tomorrow in cohort A. Our TAs have been diverted to support kindergarten and first grade students in those hybrid classes. Extended orientations and small groups for students in grades 2 to 12 will occur in all schools effective 3rd quarter. So this will be a time for, because by the time our students in grades 2 to 12 actually begin in-person instruction in 4th quarter on April 6th, they will have 17 days of in-person instruction each. So cohort A would have 17 and cohort B 17. And it's important that we ensure that that time can be maximized and leveraged to its fullest extent. So the more that we can give students an opportunity to acclimate, and their teachers, particularly those who will be teaching hybrid model, which is a new model, and we recognize a challenging model, the more opportunity they can have to acclimate together, the better. So effective 3rd quarter, those opportunities will be established at every school, developed by principals and their staff. And so principals are in the process of developing schedules and will identify staff needed to support those efforts. Until needed, staff can work remotely, but all must return on March 22nd, which is a week before our students return, grades 2 to 12, on April 6th. So that's a quick update with regards to where we are right now. Any questions with regards to information I just shared? Okay. If there are none, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Dawson. And she's going to, there are three areas that, three updates related to Plan B that were pre-recorded. One would be around Plan B demographics. And it's as part of that discussion, we're going to talk about meals in classrooms and provide some information there and give the board an opportunity to make a decision with regards to meals in classrooms. The second item is around how we're communicating in this COVID environment. And so we're going to share how the dashboard has been updated to reflect by individual school and work site and by teacher versus staff, now that we have our kindergarten and first grade students back, as well as how we are monitoring and reporting protocols and strategies. And lastly, there'll be some human resources updates with regards to vacancies, ADA, and substitutes. So with that, Dr. Dawson.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Felder. Good
course.
evening, Chair McKenzie, Vice Chair Stevens, and all board members and our community listening in tonight. Previously, we had shared some numbers on the number of families that signed up for in-person, hybrid, remote, and in-person learning. And we just wanted to bring back some more details as to how those signups broke down by our demographics, student demographics. And so what we shared with you in our presentation were some graphs, and you could see that about 58% of our families as of December 30th now, that was as of December 30th, had signed up for Plan B hybrid in-person with a combination of in-person and remote learning. And about 42% had signed up for one of the virtual options. And here you see that breakdown. And if you see, it's right around 50% breakdown of white and non-white students of how they selected. A little variance, of course, some you'll see like 45% of our non-white families selected in person versus the 55% of our white families who selected in person. And we also provided for you for the numbers. And so you see that majority of our students are in person as well as the hybrid version of our virtual academy. And in the future, in the next slides, you'll see how we also broke down the numbers by school and by grade. And what you'll notice is that at any given time, there are a small number of students who are going to be in person in school at any given time. And so if you keep going, you'll see that these are the breakdown of the elementary. And then the next slide, you'll see the middle school and high school breakdown. And in middle school and high school, there are a higher number of students coming in per grade, but at any given time, it's about 25% of the overall student population that will be in the school. And what's great about that is it allows our school teams to allow students to be in their classrooms socially distanced. So what we're excited to share with you tonight is now a more updated version of our in-person students that started today. We were so excited to see our kindergartners and our first graders. And the previous slides were as of December 30th, but as of today, you'll see here the number of students in kindergarten and first grade that attended in person under the hybrid model. And when you see the totals, you'll see that the total numbers are actually very small. And when you see by class, you see that in a class, you have some that have as small as only 2 students in person, and you'll see a higher number of around 9. So these are the half of the elementary schools. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see the remainder of the elementary schools. And I thought it was really important for us to have these numbers so that you can actually see that in our classrooms, teachers are having small number of students. And what's nice about this is the students being able to be socially distanced at 6 feet or more apart in the classrooms. And so with this information, we're bringing back to you, board members, for your review of a previous decision that was made by you at January 11th meeting. And so if we can go to the next slide, what we are asking the board tonight is if we could please revisit the requirement of students to have to eat their meals outside of the classroom and to take a look at if they can eat first and foremost outdoors when it's permissible, with weather being appropriate at 40 degrees or higher. And they would, of course, be spread out more than 6 feet apart. And then we are taking a look at how to support that by providing picnic tables, taking a look at pop-up tents to provide a little more shelter. That would be our first preference. But because, as you saw in the previous slides, with the smaller number of students in classrooms, what we are asking is that the next preference for where students eat our meals is in the classroom. And why we're asking is, we are having air purifiers in the classrooms. And of course, we would want the windows closed and doors closed when our air purifiers are on so that they can maximize the efficiency of the purification of the air via the air purifiers. And then, of course, the students would be able to be more than 6 feet apart in their classrooms. That is what we're here to ask of you tonight, if you would revisit and approve that. And of course, if we are not able to eat in the classroom, then that students would be eating indoors, but in larger areas, which you had already approved that at the January 11th meeting. And to talk to us a little bit more about the details as to why we are requesting your approval for students to be able to eat in the classrooms, I'm asking Ms. Pitts, our Director of Environmental Health and Safety, to come and help us to take a look at the different factors that we were considering prior to our request of you this evening. So Ms. Pitts.
Good evening, everyone. So as Dr. Dawson said, I am here to speak with you about the locations within the building that we would recommend dining for our students. So the recommendation would be for dining, of course, to occur outdoors if and when possible. If dining outside is not feasible due to inclement weather, based on the Weather Watch guidelines set forth by the NC Division of Child Development and Early Education, or some other environmental conditions, the recommendation would then be for the students to eat meals within their classroom versus in larger spaces in the building, based on the following information. Dining within the classroom allows for the students to remain in their pod. It maximizes instructional time due to limited travel and reduces the risk of potential widespread transmission, which could occur if students mingled with other pods. Dining in the classroom also allows for students to maintain their desks at 6 feet apart, as they're already in that arrangement, and reduced class size numbers will allow for staff to easily monitor eating and face covering compliance. Windows to the classroom and doors could be opened if contingent upon the weather to increase ventilation. However, the board has already approved the use of air purifiers into K and 1 classrooms to increase circulation of the clean air in the space. Use of the air purifiers requires that the classroom and dining spaces be defined and closed to allow the equipment to work properly and complete necessary filtration and conditioning. And of course, all guidance documents increase or call for the increased amounts of fresh air in the classrooms. Dining in large indoor spaces, however, will allow the students to take a break from their classroom space and allow for greater potential of students dining at distances greater than 6 feet apart. However, this selection will decrease instructional time as transition and setup time will be required per class. It allows for the mixing of groups and pods in the same space, which is discouraged by both NCDHHS and NCDPI guidance documents, and could increase our chances of widespread transmission and larger quarantines. Also, due to the size and layout of some of these locations, which have been defined as large eating spaces, an air purifier may not be feasible, as the space may not be defined or closed to allow maximum efficiency per the manufacturer recommendations, and would not allow for required air exchanges to occur. Dr. Dawson, I will give it back to you for the recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ms. Pitts. And board members, please know that should we have further questions, we do have Dr. Benjamin from the ABC Science Collaborative available to jump on should we want to ask him some more questions around the research and the science beyond what Ms. Pitts offered. So this evening, board, per the January 11th board decision regarding no meals in K-1 classrooms, if meals cannot be held outdoors, we are requesting the board's approval for students to be able to eat their meals in their classrooms per the conditions outlined in the previous slides. So if there aren't any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Dawson. Mr. Atherson and then Ms. Smiley.
So I have got a chance to see this in action, and I have talked to many teachers and staff where when it's raining, they're in a cafeteria with multiple pods. And, you know, one of our big goals was to limit the exposure, reduce our contact tracing, and also, you know, give, you know, staff and teachers the safest environment possible. And I think with, you know, our learning labs in some of the schools, it limits the space we can go into. I think that one of the things that maybe not everybody realizes is even eating breakfast is about a 30-minute process per group, because you have 15 minutes to go in, you have to sit down, the food is distributed, then you have to open the food, then the kids eat for 15 minutes, then you have to clean up, which is about 5 minutes for the chemicals and such to clean. Then the next group would come in, you know, after you do all that. So I fully support this. I think this helps the teachers be, you know, safer, especially when they have that option when it's raining and they can be, you know, greater than 6 foot apart in their classrooms. And I think this helps us reduce, you know, these pods being in the same area, especially at the highest risk time with masks down. And to the point earlier, some of these spaces are not conducive that they would be in for air purifiers. They just don't work, especially if you're like in a gym environment. But anyway, just my point of view.
Ms. Smiley.
A question first about the outdoors as the first preference. Two things really. One is, are you saying you would specifically require classes to go outdoors unless the conditions were so hot or cold, or it was actively raining? But as hot or cold as in the Child Care Weather Watch?
If I could respond to that, Mrs. Smiley, absolutely, because that's what the board voted on, that children would be outside.
But
so that would be the,
so they would be required to be there would be some clear criteria, and they would be required to be outside if the weather was appropriate.
Right. And if perhaps Ms. Pitts, if you can speak to the criteria, because we're following criteria that has been established already with regards to 40 degrees or above. So Ms. Pitts, can you speak
Thank you.
to that?
That would be helpful, because my understanding from looking at, and I may be looking at the wrong version, is that actually we would, like childcare, this guidance includes going out at temperatures below 40 degrees. So I'm curious about the 40 degree level, because I'm seeing guidance at going out below 40 degrees.
So yes, Ms. Smiley, you're correct. In the guidance document, they can go outside if it's less than 40 degrees, but it's all based on environmental factors, being wind chill, you know, is the speed of the air moving quickly? And it's based on what's comfortable for play, what's cautious, and what's dangerous. So of course, there are some of those areas which would fall in that yellow zone of caution, but this guideline is set for if a child were actively outdoor playing. So I would say anything that we're in the caution zone, it would be safety, of course, would be our first priority. In those yellow zones, we would recommend that the children would come inside because they're not actively moving in temps and conditions in those yellow zones, which may allow them to be cold and wouldn't be recommended.
Okay, so even though it's only like 14 minutes to eat or something like that, that's still your recommendation. Okay.
Yes, and then of course, based on environmental factors. So if it's a high allergen season and we know we have a class that there's someone in there who suffers from allergies or multiple children in there who suffer from allergies, it may be best for a particular class to stay inside.
So are we waiting the idea that, you know, there's a pandemic? So like, I hear you, like there could be wind chill or it could be damp outside, and typically we would err on the side of bringing kids in. But when we're talking about unmasking and eating food in a community setting inside, I mean, I'm just wondering if that was considered against these recommendations, because I'm not sure that that's actually a factor in these recommendations as they were created originally. So I'm just sort of wondering how that fits in.
Well, we would want to recommend guidelines that were safe for all children. Of course, if it's under 30 degrees, it may not be safe for a child to be outside for an extended period of time, or even comfortable for a child to be outside. So I think we're going to use these as a guidance and, you know, take those into consideration given the weather factors and the age of the children, because it may be okay for middle schoolers to be outside in 30 degrees if it's sunshiny and they have jackets on and everyone is properly equipped, whereas it may be uncomfortable for a preschooler. So I think that we would take into consideration the age of the children, the temperature, and the risk of putting them outside. But yes, the recommendation would be if we can get them outside to eat, that is the safest place for them to be.
Ms. Hauser?
I'm just a little confused. Are we talking about guidelines for today? Or are we talking about for the K-1 and the small groups? Or are we talking about guidelines for fourth quarter? And I'm just wondering, and I understand the guidelines and the guidance, but I wonder how much discretion the teachers will have. So for example, we just heard that some classes have 2 kids in it. So do we want to let the teacher use their discretion as to how they want, what's best for their kids at that time? I'm just a little concerned about being overly prescriptive.
Usually when it comes to recommendations about outdoor play, it's usually something that we will make as a district level to say, yes, it is safe to go outside based on weather conditions. And then, yes, a teacher could then say, if she had 2 children, and they had a safe space. But usually recommendations for temperature come based on these guidelines, and they're set forth by the district.
Ms. Smiley?
Yeah, I mean, I would be concerned. I think the point about 2 kids in a classroom, there may be some real outlier situations that maybe the district could have a process for granting an exception, but I would be concerned about broadly giving teacher level discretion over like health and safety requirement sort of decisions. I'd rather that the district be clear about what's expected so that, the same can be expected in every classroom. Here's my question about the classrooms, eating in the classrooms. I believe that the air purifiers are sort of the baseline. We're back in school. We are increasing the amount of air changes per hour in these classrooms. We're improving the ventilation. That's sort of the baseline state to me. And then what is the enhancement for the sort of riskiest part of the day when everyone's taking their masks off? That's my question. And it might be the enhancement or the next level up is, we get tents so that in all weather you can go outside. Or it might be we also open the windows in addition to running the air purifiers. Or it might be we get air purifiers in a larger space. But what I would like to see us do is have something additive for the mealtime beyond the air purifiers. And I'm curious if you have thoughts about what that would be.
I think at this point, Ms. Smiley, we can take a look at, some other items as far as, additives being, we could take a look at tents outside. As far as opening up windows, of course, that's always the recommendation for this operation. That's been the recommendation from NCDHHS. That's been the recommendation for NCDPI. So that could be something that could also be done. I mean, that could be an additive of, even if weather conditions aren't the greatest, it may be a little cooler outside. That is something that is done in addition to the air purifier. We could open up the windows, we could increase that air circulation at that time, close them back down after lunch is over, let the air purifier kick in, do the air exchanges required in that space, and not allow that space to get cold enough to where it is uncomfortable. Those are definitely other options that we can take a look at in making best practice recommendations. And I think it's, we're going to have to make adjustments and see what's best for the district as we get our students back in, and go from there.
Ms. Doyle?
Thank you for this this time to focus on this and this guidance. My perspective is that the air purifiers are the additive feature, because I feel that when the ABC Science Collaborative presented their protocol for eating, and we expressed concern about, airflow and mechanics of, modifying airflow like air purifiers, we were told it wasn't necessary. So I feel like having the air purifiers as a guarantee in classrooms where there's eating is that extra level. And just from a practical standpoint, being in the boardroom with the air purifier on, there are times when people are like teaching and talking where I would imagine you need to have it on low. And the protocol for the lunchtime guidance, where there isn't talking, it seems like they could crank it up for the lunchtime, because no one needs to be heard anyway, and then lower it back down to a classroom level. I also, just as a practical thought, I mean, it just seems like there are times during the day where kids need to be able to have a table to put their food on, I know Pathways often would have, Pathways Elementary, they'd have you do walks on the track while you're kind of having a snack. And there are times when it's practical to be walking and outside and, you're eating some pretzels and drinking some water. But there are times when you really need to be able to set your food down in like a stable place. And I just don't think we have that in hand at this point. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Doyle. Other board members? So I will just say, I think if we're opening windows and cranking air purifiers, when it's an exceptionally cold and wet day, I understand there may be times that we need to eat in classrooms, but when we made this vote originally, the idea, and I think the spirit of the motion, was trying to keep people as safe as we possibly can. And both Dr. Hassler and Dr. Benjamin have expressed that eating outside is very much the safest thing we can do. So it is my hope that regardless of how we move forward with this motion tonight, that we will look into getting tents at our schools or erecting shelters or, whatever schools need. I mean, please bring recommendations to the board. If you need picnic tables, please bring that to us. If we can put up a shelter, if we can do a tent, if you need beach towels or beach chairs, we need to keep our people safe. So that's where I'm coming from. That's, I just want to add every layer of protection we can. So that's my sort of take on it. Does anyone else have conversation, questions, concerns? Mr. Atherton?
Yeah, I agree. The safest we can be, we should be doing. I worry that right now we are putting teachers in a unnecessary risk because they are eating with two cohorts with their mask off in areas that we can't have air purifiers. And if they were in their room greater than 6 feet apart, it would be a much safer environment with the air purifier on high, the windows open, and we could do it that way. I mean, we're not saying they do that every day. I mean, as stated, outdoors is the preference. If there's risk that we can't, you know, the district look at what the options are and make sure we aren't putting them at an unnecessary risk. I know that that wasn't our intention to put cohorts together, taking their mask off, but that's what's happening due to our space at this time. And I just worry that we need to do something to help make it safer until we can figure out these other items that were mentioned as well.
And
Thank you.
if I could,
Oh,
I'm sorry, Mrs.
that's okay. Dr. Felder, you go, and then Ms. Smiley.
Okay, I just wanted to mention with regards to picnic tables, we have put that out to schools if that's what they need. And so we are starting an order for picnic tables, looking into pop-up tents, as that was a thought as well. And circling back to those larger staked in the parking lot type of tents, looking into that as well. There are some concerns about the implications of that kind of tent and what it could do to the asphalt, et cetera, but we are revisiting that again. And we certainly have let schools know mat, beach chair, beach towel, whatever you need, because outdoors is the preference. That is our go-to spot, only under certain circumstances, which we will spell out very clearly in an effort to reduce variance and misinterpretation. We want clarity and be very clear about temperature, weather conditions, etc., for outdoor eating as the first choice. And only if students cannot go outdoors, that we are asking that classrooms be the second choice for the reasons that were mentioned previously. Thank you.
Ms. Smiley.
That's great. Thanks, Dr. Felder. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to mention, you know, I think there's so much uncertainty with this new variant, well, with the multiple new variants, but the one from England that is projected to be the major variant in the US by March. Schools in Europe are closing again, primary schools, and countries are starting to require the equivalent of N95 masks. And I just think that it is to our advantage to put in more layers of protection in the event that we end up with a more contagious virus. I do think that that is forward-looking. You know, at this point, you know, in terms of eating in the classroom, if the air purifiers were on and the windows were open, I know that there's some trade-off with the efficiency, effectiveness of the air purifier itself, but overall, my understanding is that that would increase the number of air changes significantly. And so I could support that. That's something that I could support just in terms of the recommendation. If the windows were opened and the air purifier was running, I think that would sort of address the piece I have about, like, can we add an additional layer of protection?
Mr. Atherton, did I see your hands raised?
Yeah, I was just going to start a motion then. If there's no other comments.
Before you do, Mr. Atherton, I believe Dr. Benjamin wanted to make some comments.
Oh, perfect.
If that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. I'll hold on.
Sure. Dr. Benjamin? He's muted.
Mr. Jones, are you able to unmute him, please?
Yeah, but he is a panelist now, but I'll Dr. Benjamin, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So just a couple of quick things. So I think it was Ms. McKenzie who I think kind of hit the nail on the head with relation to do what you need to do to get outdoors. There will be data coming through the pipeline that relates to lunch specifically that will make the recommendation about going outside as often as possible more and more strong this winter and this spring. And those data have not yet gone through peer review, through the formal peer review process, but in talking to a couple of different authors throughout the country and reviewing and thinking through their data with them, it would be my strong recommendation to get the children outside as frequently as possible. Just to give some historical context within the ABCs itself, it was in a well-intentioned setting of multiple different classes getting together in a cafeteria that resulted in the lunchtime kind of one-pager that was developed. And the points I think Mr. Atherton made about reducing burden of contact spread, et cetera, contact tracing is well taken. So if you have to go indoors, the within classroom has some real strengths to it. As far as throughout the country, there are school districts that use a lower cut point of minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. There are districts that use 0 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chill. So 40 as your lower bound for your temperature is warm relative to many districts throughout the country. That's number one. I really like the idea of picnic tables and pop-up tents that were noted. And then I think Ms. Smiley made points, some very good points around, okay, if we do need to go inside to the classroom at that time, I understood her to say, I would like to have some things happen, such as windows open. And that's really the time to go ahead and do that. And then finally, here, given the data that are emerging, if you're going to be without mask, I would view 6 feet distance as the really, you want to achieve greater distance than that if you're going to be indoors without a mask on. And that's based on some data that's come out of some sports teams that may or may not be publicly available today. It may be coming out tomorrow. And some data that will be coming out later this spring that I anticipate will come out from Georgia, that without the mask on, 6 feet would be really the very much lower limit of distance that I would encourage, and if possible, to have greater distance than that. And I hope those comments were helpful. I'm happy to take questions about them. I think with the new variant that will emerge by probably March or April, as throughout the United States, 6 feet would really be the lower limit that I would go indoors with a mask, and would seek to go greater distance in the eating environment with children without a mask.
Thank you so much, Dr. Benjamin. Board members, do you have any questions specifically for Dr. Benjamin?
Now, can we hear Will's motion?
Absolutely.
All right. So this motion would be intended to replace the prior motion that we had for entry into one, and reads, classes will eat outdoors, and if we cannot, indoor can be done with air purifiers, windows open, and greater than 6 feet apart.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Atherton.
I'll
Do I
second
have
that.
a second from Ms. Smiley? Is there any discussion or questions before I call the vote?
Just one other discussion thing, which is we're not, well, I'd just like to encourage staff to go back and look at that temperature level, given what Dr. Benjamin said.
We will.
I would definitely appreciate that as well. I know, you know, my kids love being outside, so even when it's really cold, and clearly this is about all the kids and making sure everyone's good. But if we need to buy kids coats, whatever we can do, again, we just want to make it as safe as possible. Ms. Hauser?
The motion is about the guidance that the district will provide. Is that correct?
Correct. I didn't
Okay.
by temperature or anything like that to get to where they could adjust that.
I just would like to just know that the teachers have just a little bit of discretion, that we're not, it's not an order, it's guidance, and so they can use their judgment. If they have a small class or they have plenty of room to distance, 10 feet or whatever, that they can use their judgment.
So I'm actually not sure I'm totally comfortable with that. And I love and trust our teachers, but I've also had, and this is not speaking to any teachers that my children currently have, but my kids have not gone outside when it rains, you know, at 10 a.m. and it's 1 p.m. and 60 degrees. So I want to be really clear that being outside is very much the safest place. So I think it would be helpful for us to understand what the expectation for teachers are going to be and what that temperature is going to look like. I mean, 40 degrees and 0 degrees are a world of difference.
So, Mrs. McKenzie, what we will do is go back, look at the temperature. And again, Ms. Pitts, if you could just, I know we're in the middle of a motion, but I wanted to understand, well, where did 40 degrees come from? And so, Ms. Pitts, can you speak to that? But we will go back and revisit the temperature. But what I would advise the board to do or recommend would be that we hold firm to outdoors as the number one option and only under certain circumstances. And we can lay those out in terms of temperature, blah, 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 blah. Will they not go outside? And then the next option would be classroom with all the parameters that Mr. Atherton stated. To do otherwise would allow for variance. I'm sorry. It just will happen naturally. And this is not something where we can vary. We have to hold the line given the pandemic.
Well, I trust you to implement that, Dr. Felder, so I'm comfortable moving forward. Is there any other discussion or questions before I call the vote? Okay. Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you so much, everyone. Now we will move into the Plan B budget items. Is that correct, Dr. Felder? Yes.
Absolutely correct, Mrs. McKenzie. Ms. Rath, lead us through this portion of the meeting.
Welcome, Ms. Rath.
Welcome. Good evening, everyone. This evening, Richard Lewis, the Director of School Community Relations, will be presenting to the board the recommended rates for after school as well as for our supervised learning labs. We have been working and looking at this in regards to the rates that were established in previous years, as well as our current COVID environment. He and I have been collaborating on this, and I'm now going to turn the presentation over to him to give him an opportunity to walk you through the recommendation. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Ms. Rath. Good evening, everyone. I pray that you're all doing well, and I thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. This evening, we would like to recommend the fees for the district's after-school and supervised learning lab programs. With the decision to delay reentry of our 2nd through 5th grade students, the number of anticipated students decreased. This is reflected in the cost per week and the total for the 9 weeks grading period. Let me see. As reflected on the slides. With the decision to delay the reentry of our 2nd through 5th grade students, our number of anticipated students decreased. This is reflecting the cost. But once we include our 2nd through 5th grade families, the number of staff and the related cost increases to support our families who have expressed the need for childcare. Next slide, please. The displayed rates are what we would like to recommend. After school's full rate will not increase from last year's rate of $56.50 as a result of COVID-19, and to support families who will be referred by the school's social worker and/or guidance counselor, we suggest a reduced rate. Also, to support our families with multiple children, our family rates are reduced. The supervised learning labs were determined by the approximate cost of the program. This aligns with our enterprise program of being self-sustaining as possible. Next slide, please. We would like the board's decision on the supervised learning lab and after-school fees. And should the above fees not be approved, please recommend, discuss, and approve alternate fees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Hauser?
I didn't have my hand raised, but let me ask, can you just go back to the prior slide, just because I just want to, could you go back on? So we're increasing, are we increasing the, no, not that slide, the next one. I just wanted to see, are we increasing the rate for our staff? I'm for after school.
No, ma'am. Staff are, as per the board's decision, staff receive after-school care for free.
Okay, good. And the family rate is, okay. And then also the before-school care is free, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Other board members?
Well, if this is an action item, I move the approval of the recommendation.
I have a motion from Ms. Stevens and a comment from Ms. Smiley. So I am going to take that before I call the vote. Ms. Smiley?
Sorry, just my only question is around the reduced rate and the referrals from the guidance counselor and social worker, and just I expect that there are some families who might not be on the radar of the social worker and guidance counselor, but who would still have a hard time affording the rate. And so are we going to publicize sort of a process for someone to apply for that or something like that? It looks like Mr. Lewis's internet is having some trouble, so I don't know if there's anyone else who could speak to it.
Ms. Stokes, can you speak to this, please?
Sorry, yes, good evening. Yes, we have discussed that, and we will provide some parameters for our school social workers and school administration to follow to ensure that we don't miss anyone.
Okay, thank you. So I'll second the motion that was made earlier.
I have a motion from Ms. Stevens and a second from Ms. Smiley. Any other discussion, questions, concerns before we vote? Okay, Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle,
Yes.
Ms. Hauser,
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
We have unanimously approved the Plan B budget items. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Rath. Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is school names research, and we will welcome Dr. Keeling to discuss that with us. And I would like to remind board members, please mute if you're not speaking.
I'm sorry, Ms. McKenzie, we had one other Plan B update to share before, if that's okay?
Sure, that's just fine.
All
Mr.
right.
Atherton, was that what you were going to say, or did you have another comment?
No, that's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask if we were skipping that. Okay.
Okay, on our, on the agenda, it looked like we were doing all of them and then these votes, so I just got messed up, but thank you, Dr. Felder.
Good evening, Chair McKenzie, Vice Chair Stevens, and members of the board. A quick update on our COVID communication, monitoring, and reporting protocols. We have updated our flow chart, and this continues to evolve as we continue to meet with our school nurses, administrators, and tweak our processes to ensure that we are as effective and efficient as possible, particularly when it comes to notifying staff and or families of in-person students of a positive COVID test or result. So this flow chart, I'll just point out three key things here. Number one, if anyone, in-person staff or student is experiencing COVID symptoms, awaiting test results, has been exposed to COVID or has a positive test result, stay home. They are to stay home until they hear from the nurse, and they are also to contact, if it's a staff member, contact their supervisor, and if it's a student, that family member should contact the school principal. And then at that point, you can see there are a lot of different things that occur. But the piece I want to point out is at this on this flow chart at the bottom, that bottom rectangle, there is a district team as needed. And so if at any point we feel like there could be a link between two cases, we meet, and we meet immediately, and we meet whatever day of the week, whatever time of day, it doesn't matter. And we have met, and to this date, to this point, we haven't had any cases where they've been linked, but we just want to ensure that we're being as responsive as possible. So this really is about communicating with families, the public, but also internally communicating. And then the next slide refers, this is a positive case letter template. And so as we promised our families and staff, if there is a positive case reported at any location or school, we will send notification immediately, same day, to those that are on site. So this is an example of what we send. We note if there have been close contacts. We always, our school nurses notify close contacts before this letter goes out. So when the letter goes out, it's not, it wouldn't be a surprise if you had been a close contact. And then we just remind everyone to contact staff and site administrators if they believe that they have COVID. And the next, this is the dashboard that we have used through actually yesterday. This is the dashboard where we report by grade level and non-school locations. Each week, the number of students and staff who have reported a positive case, any new clusters, and then the green column are the cumulative reported cases to date since December 7th. And then beginning this Friday, our dashboard will update to our new dashboard, and we will note, and that's on the next slide, we will note by location and by students or staff any new cases, new clusters, or and our cumulative reported positive cases. And we're able to do this because we have more students and staff back, and so releasing this information would not identify who that individual was. In addition to our communication strategies, we continue to monitor and offer a variety of reporting compliance strategies. This includes an external phone number, internal extension, an email box, a survey tool, any means for which folks can share any compliance issues that they see. And these can be shared anonymously, and then we have a district level team that follows up accordingly. We also monitor compliance with daily walkthroughs. We have a checklist that we use, a random review of bus, school, worksite videos, and we are developing a way to recognize our schools, buses, and work sites that have greater than 99% adherence to masking in particular, and we have waste and worksite safety teams under development. And if you don't have any questions, the next presenter is Ms.
Before you punt to the next presenter, I just wanted to insert here that and thank you, Ms. Stowe, for sharing. In an effort to further support our COVID monitoring and compliance strategies, looking into hiring 3 temporary positions that would fall under the Director of Safety and Environmental Health. These would be COVID captains. These would be full-time temporary positions who had a singular focus to monitor, collect data, and help focus on the adherence to the 3 Ws. And so part of their work would be to pull video footage, collect data on, and help with monitoring, again, the 3 Ws, including the screening processes, et cetera. So do we have staff who are doing this? Yes. So our principals and their designees, as well as central office staff, are dispersed in schools to help support this effort on top of everything else that they do. And given what we know about what we learned in terms of lessons from schools that have been open since the fall, is that, you know, what we want to avoid is any pandemic fatigue. And so to have these positions in place would be helpful to get us through this this period of time. And so I'll come back with more information, but I just thought this would be a good place to insert another strategy for that some other districts are using and finding successful, in addition to strategies that Ms. Stowe just presented, to help ensure that we are fully compliant to the 3 Ws. So any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Felder and Ms. Stowe. Ms. Doyle and then Mr. Atherson.
Thank you, Ms. Stowe. I have a question. If I understand correctly, and we've talked about this before, so the dashboard we have currently that's going to end just says elementary, middle, high, because we don't want to like inadvertently identify individuals when we are communicating information. When we switch to the new one, since we just have kindergartners and first graders back, is the understanding that there's still increased anonymity at middle and high schools because we're going to have more of the small groups and orientations going on? Are we actually going to have small groups at the middle schools as well as the high schools? Because otherwise, I'm just wondering how that will change.
Thank you for bringing that up. And yes, that was shared from Dr. Dawson. We discussed this at length, that yes, with orientation, the month of February, small groups, athletics, middle and high school, there's a lot going on. Testing, which that was last week, but there are enough students on site that this wouldn't identify who that individual was. And also, you know, to wait until April 6th, there's just too many people on site and expected on site in February, March to hold off on those until April 6th.
Thank you.
Mr. Atherson?
Thanks, Ms. Stowe, for the update on all this. The question I had was, how can we get this greater frequency than every Friday? I've gotten lots of feedback about you know, a database or something that updates every afternoon versus every Friday, because it always feels like it's in the rears of, you know, what happened prior, giving the community a little better feeling that they can look at it and know that, you know, it's true to what's going on in our district. Is there a way we can get the frequency a little sooner than a week at a time?
So the data is tabulated daily by our school nurses, and I certainly have access to that and could do that. I think we had, just in looking at what other districts did, and I'm sure there's someone that does it daily. A lot of them did it by week, and so, but it wouldn't be a problem to do that. Just need to determine if that's.
Well, I think Ms. Stowe is being very kind, and I appreciate that, but it is no easy task. And I don't know if we could look into another way to do that, but I just would have some reservations about tasking her with every day having to I mean, we have the data on a daily basis. And there's a reason why districts are doing it on a weekly basis. It's a manpower issue. It's just a lot of work. It's tedious. Yeah.
Yeah, if we're doing it by manual spreadsheets, that's awful. I mean, this is ideal for a database where each person enters in their data and then it gets updated. But I realize that's where we are right now. But I mean, hopefully we're looking at ways to help, you know, gather data, centralize it, and, you know, get other resources to help us manage, you know, all this data we're getting. So anyway.
No, I agree with you, Mr. Atherton. We worked quickly and to stand this up. And, you know, it is a system that works, but it is a tedious process. And so if we can, you know, find other ways to get at this, we will certainly will. But this is where we are right now.
All right, I may help offline with this.
Okay, give me a call.
Ms. Hauser?
I love the idea, so thank you for this. I love the idea of taking some of the pressure off our principals to assure compliance. And I just wondered, especially now as we're bringing kids back to school, do the schools have the resources they need for all these new things they have to do with attestation and keeping the spaces clean and moving kids around and outdoor spaces? So and that's one side of it. And then the other side is to maintain the technology in the schools. So are we also looking at technology needs in our schools and staff needs in our schools?
Thank you, Ms. Hauser. I would say absolutely. This is an evolving situation that we're in, and we continue to have discussions. We continue to identify needs. We continue to revise and tweak. And so, yeah, I mean, we have added to the technology, and we've shared that with the board previously, again, based on need. We continue to be open. It's like, what do you need? And as we learn from other districts too, we're able to bring suggestions in to see if they will work for us. So yeah, I mean, we are constantly reviewing, revisiting, reflecting, having conversations about what the needs are. And we'll do whatever we need to do to ensure those needs are met.
Thank you, Dr. Felder.
Sure.
Anyone else? Okay, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, next up will be Mrs. Cunningham Brown, and she will bring the third and last section of the Plan B updates before we go to the school names research findings. Ms. Cunningham Brown, please.
Good evening, board chair, vice chair, board members, Superintendent Felder, and community. I want to share some updates with you regarding human resources. First, I'd like to share some information with regards to our vacancy report. I feel that we're in a good position. We're continually recruiting and working with university partners with regards to recruiting teachers. At this date, we have 1 elementary classroom position. We have 4.5 non-classroom positions at the elementary level that are vacant. At the middle school level, we have 2 classroom positions. At the middle school level, we have 2 non-classroom positions. And at the high school, we have 1 classroom vacancy and 1 non-classroom vacancy. The next area that I'd like to bring you update is regarding our Americans with Disabilities Act, and looking at this chart. The chart reflects by school the number of approved ADA requests, and then it also gives you, based on that person's approval of ADA, if they would need a substitute. So some of our ADA cases, many, as you can see from this chart, they would not need a substitute because maybe perhaps they have been tasked to be the virtual teacher. You see in comparison, for example, at New Hope Elementary, they have 2 ADA requests, but 1 will need a sub, which means we'll need a substitute to monitor the classroom. The teacher is home on ADA and delivering the instruction. So I wanted to just give you a snapshot on where we are with regards to our ADA request to work remotely and how that compares to substitutes. I know that the recruitment of substitutes continues to be of grave concern around the nation, around our state, and in our district, for example. We this time last year, we probably had over 200 people on our sub roles. And as a result of the pandemic, currently our numbers are quite lower than that. Next slide, I want to just talk a little bit more about that framework with regards to substitute coverage. We have a framework. It's a 3-tier approach to how we would cover our substitute needs. The first tier is regarding school internal coverage. Most of our schools on any given day cover some of their substitute needs with other staff members that are in the building. For example, our elementaries do this regularly. If they have a TA and a staff member is out, they may cover it with that TA. Our second tier of support is from our substitute pool. We currently have over 50 substitutes who have committed to working at all levels. They'll be working virtually if need be, or as we return back on our staggered return, we'll need subs to cover classes not only for folks that are on ADA, but we'll also need coverage for substitutes as staff are quarantined. So that's really the unknown is the number of quarantines that we might have on a given day. And that's why we have built this 3-tier framework to address our substitute needs. The last tier that I wanted to call your attention to is central office substitutes. With the help, and I'd like to thank Jason Johnson and our CNI colleagues. Mr. Johnson has created a plan to recruit over 35 and central office staff members like myself, Dr. Felder, and many of our cabinet members. We have volunteered to be on the sub pool in the event that we need to get to a tier 3 coverage. So those are just some of the things that we're doing with regards to substitutes. We continue to monitor staffing needs at the school and continue to look. I heard a board member talk about just being flexible with regards to the needs and how the pandemic requires us to look differently at our needs. But we are continuing to look across the organization, such as our transportation and operations department, to ensure expeditious response and support to any needs that may arise. For instance, with the increased changes for bus routes, this may require that we need additional persons to help with bus routes. And so again, we are just continuing to monitor what the needs are. Our operations team is looking into creating our own OCS, emergency response team, to remediate any impacted spaces instead of relying only on external cleaning services. So again, these types of conversations are going on throughout the district with HR, with our different chiefs, to make sure that we stand ready to provide any additional staffing. We are still recruiting for additional nurses, and we'll continue as staffing needs make themselves known, and working with the different principals and different chiefs. And I'll pause to see if there are any questions with regards to human resources.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Sorry about that, y'all. Ms. Stevens, and then Mr. Atherton, and then Ms. Hauser.
Oh, all right. My question is, you mentioned that people in central office will stand ready to work in your substitute pool. Are those staff members required to take all of those classes that the substitutes have to take?
Well, we have different classes that all of our staff members take. Here recently, focusing on our COVID and the 3 Ws. We have many staff members that are certified, like myself. I'm certified as a social studies teacher. So many of the folks that are on the list are certified teachers. At some point, I still have my license as a certified social studies teacher, and many of my colleagues do as well.
All right.
And if I could just add, I'm sorry, Mrs. Stevens, if you don't mind, if I could just add that, is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to add that some of us would be in a position of serving as a supervisor of the learning, meaning much like a supervised learning lab. So not necessarily delivering the instruction, but the teacher is, wherever the teacher is, remote and still teaching, but the class needs supervision. So that may be a role that some of us who do not have are not certified to teach or meet those qualifications, but are still staff, can fill that position.
All right. Well,
Thank you
my
for that.
question that I had that I didn't really hear the answer is that I understand about licenses and such, but being a substitute myself, knowing just last week I just went through 3 classes, and you can have your teacher's license, but what about going through those classes on bloodborne pathogens and OSHA and all of that? So it's required of our substitutes, and it's very good information. And I just threw that out there because I thought if we're making our substitutes take those classes, then I believe everybody else, if they're going to go into the classroom, they need to be ready as well. Thank you.
Ms. Stevens, so all of our employees, there are certain classes that everybody has to take each, like the bloodborne pathogens and the OSHA. So some of those types of training are required of everybody each year, regardless of your position. And bloodborne pathogens and OSHA are just 2 examples.
I honestly can't remember who was next in line. So Mr. Atherton, I think it was you and then Ms. Hauser. Sorry, y'all.
Thank you. So the question I had was on the open positions. I know there's a lot of EC. I think there's four that are open. The question I have is, I do know that we were offering incentives to the EC area. Are we still offering incentives given such a high number?
You're right, Mr. Atherton. We have 4 EC positions across the district that are vacant. And we can revisit the incentive for those 4 positions.
Yes, I've heard from some of the schools that they're not even getting people applying for those positions. Is that true?
Because each position has a individual position number, the applicant numbers vary at each school, but in working in collaboration with our director, Connie Cremens, we've been continuing to recruit and continuing to recruit at all our all of our positions. And we'll have at least another position filled in the coming days. So we'll continue to recruit all levels, but especially our critical needs areas.
Miss Cunningham Brown, can I interject just a minute?
Yes, you certainly can, my friend.
Hi, Mr. Atherton and board. So I've been monitoring the vacancies really closely and working with principals. And although the applicant pool is small, they are filling slowly. So I know that, for instance, the New Hope position that's been vacant all year, we have a good candidate. We're just going through the interview process with that. If you look at, there's been 2 positions vacant at AL Standback. 1 just got filled. There's a strong candidate for Cedar Ridge vacancy. So although they've been out there, they are slowly starting to fill. So I'm very pleased to see that.
Okay, I definitely encourage, if we need incentives like we had before, I think it's something y'all can bring to the board for us to discuss, because this EC, as you mentioned, that pool keeps getting smaller and smaller every year, and they're our most needy in our district. So thank y'all both.
And actually, Mr. Atherton, we're finding the same is true with our psychologists. And Connie, you may want to speak to that while you have the floor. We're losing them left and right. Well, maybe not quite so much, but we are to other districts who, you know, have a greater incentive around salary, quite honestly. So that's something we want to bring to the board as well.
Sure. Our school psychologists, it is a critical need. And as I brought to the board, I believe it was the beginning of last year, if you look at the number of school psychologists that we have, it's still below the state recommended ratio. The other thing is that the amount of work due to COVID and the amount of work prior to that, we are falling down on some of our critical timelines, and particularly the timelines to identify students with a disability. We are 100 students behind in that work. Now, we have a contract, we're making that up, but this work is going to be ongoing throughout the summer, throughout into next school year. So anything that we can do to help establish a firm base of psychologists and provide them work over the summer, or the ability to work over the summer to help us get caught up, as well as put pieces in place for our multi-tier system of support in order to be able to meet the SEL needs, our social emotional needs of students as they come back. I think they will play a critical role in that. And so the more that we can do to support that vital position, taking them away from just testing, identify, but to put them in a role that they really want to be in, I think will only serve to better the district.
Those are great points. Thank y'all for bringing that up as well, sharing.
Thank you. Mr. Atherton, can I remind you to mute, please? Just, we got a lot of feedback going on. Ms. Hauser?
Okay, I just have a couple of questions. One is AIG, and I was wondering if our AIG positions are now all filled, or are we, so that's one. And then the second question is, what is our trend on absenteeism? So I had heard at the start of the new year that we were seeing very high absenteeism in some of our schools, and I wonder how is that trending?
Ms. Hauser, currently at the elementary level, we have a AIG position that's in place or vacant at a Pathways Elementary School. And my last conversation with the principal is that they were conducting interviews. That is the only AIG position that is vacant throughout the district.
And Central?
I don't have a AIG position. I believe that that's a shared position with Central and Pathways. So it's a shared position, Ms. Hauser.
And Ms. Hauser, that too is one that we will bring to the board and provide an update or more thorough information around our short-term plan and our long-term plan with regards to AIG at a future board meeting.
Can I just ask, is that always a shared position or is it just a shared position right now?
It's not always been a shared position, but each year our central office colleagues look at the number of students and make determinations of how many positions and at what school. And so that was the allocation for this year.
Okay. Ms. Doyle?
Just a little more clarity around that, and I'm glad you're saying that you're going to bring that to fuller discussion, Dr. Felder, but my understanding is Central Elementary had to share a position last year, which may have been around student numbers, but Pathways did have a full or near full time AIG teacher, and it's when that person left that that spot is now shared between Central and Pathways. So Pathways doesn't have a history of a 50-50 AIG, but they're the person who has they're the school that has the vacancy. Am I correct? And then one other question I have around that, and I know we might come back to this later, but is my understanding that some of the AIG, like higher level people are coming in to fill in, or is it still just that one person at the AIG elementary level that's splitting that time?
So, Ms. Doyle, great questions. I know that he's on the panel. So, Dr. Gammon, can you just provide a response? Sure. And we know we're going to come back and really go in depth on the long and short term plans of AIG. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Felder. And Ms. Doyle, you're correct that the position this past year at Pathways was a full-time position where that person did work there the majority of the week, but then they also shared some time at Cameron Park. And then when there was a reconfiguration this year based off of numbers, there became a split position between Pathways and Central, but then that position was vacated at the beginning of the school year. So they've been in the process throughout the year of interviewing for that position. Our lead talent development coordinator who works at the district level has essentially stepped in to serve as that teacher for both Central and Pathways, in addition to her stated job duties. So she's been doing that since the beginning of the year. Over the holiday break, we do have 2 candidates that they were in the process of interviewing. I haven't heard the latest update on those interviews, but I know that was something that was occurring when we can't return from the break. And so we're definitely working diligently to hopefully fill that position very quickly.
Thank you, Dr. Gammon. Sarah, Ms. Smiley, excuse me.
Before I forget, one thought on the AIG thing. Before Dr. Felder, your time, but I don't think I'm not sure, Dr. Gammon. The district provided for a substantial number of teachers to receive AIG certification. I think it was like 40 plus staff members. So I would imagine we have a lot of staff members with that experience. So we can talk more about that another time. I have an actual question about the substitutes and that piece. One was bus drivers and whether we have sort of an adequate pool of folks for that. I know when the state guidance first came out and they were like, you need to have a big pool of plans for who's going to drive your buses in case there are vacancies in bus drivers. That seemed tricky. So I have a question about that. How are we on bus driver substitutes?
We have a pool of substitute bus drivers, and I work in collaboration with Mr. Albert and Ms. McCulley. I'm not aware of any shortages at this moment, but those are the types of positions that we keep posted all year in order to recruit bus drivers and substitute bus drivers. And what we typically do is we'll start them out as a sub bus driver and make sure that they're up to our expectations, and then we quickly move them into permanent positions.
Okay, thank you. And the one other question I had was a little bit longer term, but knowing that I'm curious how we are on recruiting new teachers and other staff for next year, but especially teachers. Like, do we have substitute teachers? That substitute teachers I know has traditionally been a big place for us. Are we doing that in COVID? Or I imagine a lot of these job fairs are canceled. Like, how are we doing on for next year?
We continue to recruit, and you're right, most of our recruitment events are now virtual events. So at these events, and some of them are career fairs, so we're always continuing to increase our substitute roster, but also our teacher rosters too, and kind of foreshadowing where the needs will be for next year. So if we see outstanding candidates that we could offer early contracts. So those are just some of the strategies that we have in place. Actually, coming up in the next month, I've been invited to attend an event at Central to be on a panel to vet some of their new teachers and some of their new administrators. So we're trying to, and that'll be virtual, but again, trying to just make and increase our partnerships with the different local universities has been one of our focus areas. And actually, we also continue to focus on our Grow Your Own program. So that program is still in full effect. And so that program has been very successful in recruiting some of our classified employees into teacher positions. And so we are continuing to nurture that program and reach out to other eligible classified staff.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to re-elevate Ms. Hauser's question about employee absenteeism. Ms. Hauser, if you wanted to ask again, or maybe Ms. Cunningham-Brown, you were clear on that question, and I think I kind of skipped ahead.
Ms. Cunningham-Brown, the essence of my question is the surge in the virus and community spread affecting our teachers, and are we seeing an increased outage and unusually high absentee levels in our teaching staff and our general staff, bus drivers, everybody else?
You're on mute, Ms. Cunningham-Brown.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so as a result of the pandemic, we have experienced an increase in absenteeism due to quarantines. And so that has certainly increased. HR is working on a report to give the board a comparison of absenteeism based on last year and based on this year. And I to have that report in the next weekly bulletin to you so that you can see how that's actually reflected. But absolutely, our absenteeism is impacted by COVID-19 with regards to quarantines.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions or discussion from board members for Ms. Cunningham-Brown? Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Cunningham-Brown. Dr. Felder, is there anything else before we move on to school names research?
No, ma'am.
Very good. Well, we will then welcome Dr. Keeling to present on that.
Good evening.
Awesome.
Everyone. So I am here tonight to give, for your information, some information around our review of school names. This review was conducted as part of our board resolution for the board's next steps towards equity in education. It was item number 10, and it said that it calls for us to review the names of the buildings in our district to examine their origin and compliance with policy 1030, which is our equity in education policy. In policy 1030, it states that Orange County schools shall review and revise existing policies, programs, professional development, and procedures to reflect applicable laws and the district's definition of equity. Board Policy 1030 calls for us to not only ensure that everything we do from this point forward reflects the district's definition of equity, but we also have to examine everything that's already in place to ensure that they reflect the district's definition of equity. The board resolution and the statement in Board Policy 1030 is our why behind engaging in this review of school names. Next slide, please. So the first part of the resolution required that we examine the origin of the names of schools. And so school administrators, equity leads, and school-based equity teams took the lead on researching the origin of the names of their school buildings. They conducted internet searches and collected information from such sources as newspaper articles, online encyclopedias, and archived materials. They also conducted informal interviews with school board members, administrators, and staff members who served at the school at the time that the name was chosen. The teams then submitted their findings to me, and I compiled them into a summary, which I have presented to the board. It's in a chart form. So the next part of the resolution required that we examine the names of those school buildings for their compliance with Policy 1030. And so within Board Policy 1030, there is a definition of equity. And within that definition, it also outlines some strategies that the district will use to promote equity. And so as I examined the names of the buildings compliance with Policy 1030, I used the district definition and the strategies that promote equity as the lens. Next slide. So here is the district definition of equity. I won't read that for everyone. It is in our Policy 1030. So we can go on to the next slide. And here at the top of this slide are the district strategies that improve equity, also within Policy 1030. And so in looking at the district's definition and the strategy, here is the lens that I used as part of the review. And so I asked, are there any vestiges of racial or other forms of discrimination, barriers, and bias? Is there a recognition of the diversity of our staff and student groups? And were there any actions and systems that resulted in and continue to account for negative and inequitable outcomes for staff and student groups? Next slide. And so I won't read all of the names for everyone. Again, it's part of the table that I have submitted for your information. Here, I'm just highlighting those names that stand out when I examine the origin of the names of the schools through the lens that I just stated. So this is not to suggest that all of the names do not comply. It's just what stands out when you look at it through the lens. The first key finding that isn't mentioned on the slides is that Orange County Schools no longer names schools for persons. However, the names of the schools that are named after the individuals are all named after males. So we don't have any schools that are named for females. We can go on to the next slide. So in summary, some names of the schools are embedded in slavery and racial segregation. Some names speak to the spirit of overcoming racial bias and barriers. Some names pay homage to the history long before either of these. And next slide. So the findings are now in the hands of our equity leads and our school-based equity teams, the equity task force, and the student equity teams. All of these groups have it. They are reviewing and they will provide me feedback in the coming weeks. I will then take all of this feedback and recommendations and present that to the board at a February board meeting, at which time it will be an action item for you all. And any questions? You can go to the last slide.
Thank you so much, Dr. Keeling. I am super appreciative of you and your efforts and all of the teams at our individual schools who participated in this research. It's been surprising in some ways and confirmed some things that I think some of us already suspected, but I am appreciative of the knowledge and just this time for us to reflect on the names, and looking forward to our conversation at one of our February meetings. Ms. Hauser?
I just have a question, a simple question about Eflin Cheeks. There's a couple, you know, the Eflin Cheeks has long-standing ties to the community, the African-American community, particularly in Eflin. And you know, I've heard that there's some upset at Orange County Schools when we changed the name to Eflin Cheeks Global Elementary. So I wonder if your research just learned anything about that, and if there's any interest in just changing it back to its original historically accurate name.
So in that preliminary round of research, that did not come out. But as I presented the names of the schools to the Equity Task Force, and we didn't get to have an in-depth conversation yet because we had other things on the agenda. But one of the things that came out was some of like what you're saying, some of this history and people feeling connected to certain names. And so I think in this round, as the names have gone back to the teams and to the schools, now we can start getting more input, more conversation around how did this name come to be and what are the ties to this name. So hopefully, Ms. Hauser, as this goes back to Eflin Cheeks, to the whole team and to the school, that some of that will start to come out. But also, if you as board members have some of that history, please let me know so that I can also like put that in the final report. It's going to take all of us to have that input because all of us know more than some of, well, definitely more than what I know. So please let me know if you have more information.
Other board members? Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Keeling. We appreciate you, and we will see you again at either our next board meeting or the one after that to follow up about this. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the resolution for Dr. Kazmikia Corbett, and our vice chair, Ms. Brenda Stevens, will be reading the resolution for us this evening.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Orange County Schools Board of Education resolution honoring Dr. Kezzmekia S. Corbett. Whereas Kezzmekia S. Corbett, PhD, currently is a research fellow in the viral pathogenesis laboratory at the National Institutes of Health, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases Vaccine Research Center, and whereas Kezzmekia Corbett raised in the Cedar Grove community of Orange County, North Carolina, attended Orange County schools, during which time she spent 2 summers in the Project Seed Summer Intern Program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, thus becoming a testament to her innate abilities and to the value of investing in the education of youth. And whereas Dr. Corbett received her Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences with a secondary major in sociology in 2008 from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, where she was a Meyerhoff Scholar and an NIH undergraduate scholar. And whereas Dr. Corbett earned her doctorate of philosophy in microbiology and immunology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2014, and whereas a viral Immunologist by training, Dr. Corbett was appointed by the Viral Pathogenesis Laboratory in 2014 and has focused her work on developing novel coronavirus vaccines, which has become a primary vaccine against the virus that causes COVID-19. And whereas in response to COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Corbett and her team designed the vaccine concept incorporated in mRNA-1273 from virus sequence and rapidly deployed to Moderna Inc. for FDA-approved phase 1 clinical trial, which began only 66 days from the viral sequence release and was shown to be 94.1% effective in phase 3 trial and received emergency use authorization from the FDA. And whereas Dr. Corbett has received numerous honors, awards, and fellowships, has been a keynote speaker and invited lecturer at universities, medical schools, and research centers across the nation, and has published as a co-author, senior author, and first author. And whereas Dr. Corbett has been acknowledged by Dr. Anthony Fauci for her research and successful results in the development of a vaccine for the novel coronavirus, and is now receiving national acclaim. And whereas Dr. Corbett is an active member of the NIH Fellows Committee, an advocate of STEM and education and vaccine awareness, and a mentor, and engages in outreach to African American youth and adults. Now, therefore, be it resolved on behalf of our community, the Orange County Schools Board of Education does hereby honor Orange County Schools alumni, Dr. Kezzmekia S. Corbett, and expresses our sincere appreciation and recognition for her remarkable accomplishments in the sciences and medicine, in acknowledgement of her unprecedented research and success in thwarting a life-threatening pandemic, and in honor of her compassionate dedication to health, safety, and well-being of humanity, approved this 25th day of January 2021.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stevens. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
A motion from Mr. Atherton, and I'm sorry, who was the second?
Sarah and I both.
Ms. Doyle is our second. Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
And Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Resolution is unanimously approved.
Yes.
Thank you so much. The next item on our agenda is discretionary transfer and admission options. Dr. Felder?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. McKenzie. So at this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Dawson. This presentation was pre-recorded, so she again is going to provide a very high-level summary and then engage the board in any questions and answers before action is taken. So Dr. Dawson, please.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Felder. So yes, each year, board members, as you know, we have 2 windows of application actually, and we're in one currently, and that's our choice program window. And during the month of January, our families can apply to have their students attend one of our 4 choice programs. And then in February, and this presentation is focused more on the February window of the discretionary transfers. And this is where our students who are typically assigned to their school in their attendance zones can choose to apply to attend a different school should there be any seats open at the schools. And each year we come to request approval from the board of those schools that are open to these transfer requests and those that are closed to these transfer requests. And we determine which schools are open and closed based upon the number of seats available at the different grade levels, and then of course based on the capacity of the school building. And as presented to you, there are a number of schools that are over capacity, and then there are a number of schools that are under capacity. And so this evening we come to you for your request for approval of these following open schools, which is Pathways Elementary for grades 4 and 5, ALS Standback for grades 6 through 8 up to 80 seats, CWS for grades 6 through 8 up to 60 seats, Gravely Hill Middle School for grades 6 through 8 with no limit at this time. And then for Orange High School, they used to be a closed school, but due to one of the construction projects being finished, that will be finished for next year, we are requesting that be open for transfer, discretionary transfer to Orange High School. And currently still closed are Cameron Park Elementary, Grady Brown Elementary, New Hope, and Pathways Elementary for grades K through 3, and then Cedar Ridge, other than of course Cedar Ridge does have their IB program that is a choice program. And Central Elementary also has their engineering as a choice program, and then Hillsborough, that's year-round, and Eflin Cheeks, which is for their global choice program. And just to note that at all of our schools this year, under COVID circumstances, we did have a slight drop in attendance, except for Eflin Cheeks, which their attendance this year pretty much stayed pretty level based on last year. So we are requesting your approval, board members, for the 21-22 discretionary transfer recommendations. And what's really exciting is that as we look forward to this strategic planning process, we will be reviewing this whole process around, the choice programs and how well are we offering choice programs and the processes that we use for both choice and discretionary applications. So we will be reviewing all of that, but at this time, we're maintaining the protocols that we've been using. And so if there are any questions, I'm open to questions.
Dr. Dawson, I just wanted to ask you one question. When I was looking at the numbers for how we were determining what was open and what was closed, I noticed that we were using a number around 1,000 for Cedar Ridge High. And it was my understanding that with the new addition that we just cut the ribbon for, that would increase this number of seats to 1,500. And so I was just wondering if you could speak to that and the ratio of students that are enrolled. And now we have so much more capacity. Is it still closed, or is that something we should reconsider?
So because we did look at that actually for a couple schools, while the building itself has more capacity, and again, for students who are zoned to attend that school, of course, that's still available. But as far as actual transfer from another zoned school to attend there, we were also looking at staffing capacity. So based on, the number of staff that are assigned there, for us to be able to transfer students per grade, that we wouldn't necessarily have the staffing to take on those additional students.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that a little bit more.
Sure.
Ms. Smiley and then Mr. Atherton.
That was going to be a big piece of my question. And I would also like to understand how the staffing piece comes into play, because my instinct is if we have the space in the building, which was the point of building that addition, that we would then, allow it for some future date. The one thing I'm wondering about, knowing that Eflin Cheeks was the one not to drop, do we have any indication, just planning for next year, whether that is some unusual dynamic about that's different than the other elementary schools about this COVID time, or whether that's actually the part of the county where we have been expecting to see more growth due to more construction, right? So like, do we expect that to also bump up in a similar way to the other elementary schools, hopefully, if we sort of regain some of the enrollment that we've lost this year due to COVID?
So just touching back on the staffing, again, this is for the discretionary transfer requests, right? So if I am at Orange High School and I'm a sophomore there and I want to transfer to Cedar Ridge for my junior year, so we would take a look at what seats available like at junior year. And of course, you know, just because the building itself is bigger and has more capacity doesn't mean that one student could think that there would be a seat necessarily available for a transfer to the junior class at Cedar Ridge just because there's more space available. So, and that was how we were looking at the discretionary transfer requests. I do know that, and I was speaking with Ms. Dodson, who's the student assignment specialist, about this in preparation for this presentation, as well as when we recorded it. This is, I think, a process that in our strategic planning, this whole, it's time for us to review our protocol that we use and the numbers that we're using. And also we do know that there are new developments going up. And this is why, too, in speaking with Ms. Jones as well, why we would like to move forward the facilities study that would take a look at our growth and the numbers and revisit how we are doing this process to ensure that we are using proper numbers and you know, updating our growth in our county, our district. And so there's definitely work here in this area to be done. And we do meet each year with the it's called SAPFO, schools, to look at the school's adequate public facilities ordinance. And we look at that with other county planning representatives from Carrboro, Chapel Hill, and Hillsborough, along with our 2 county school districts. And so we will be convening in February to take a look at our growth and our capacity and reviewing those numbers as well. So there is work to be done here in areas for review and revisement.
Mr. Atherton and then Ms. Hauser.
So I know, I'll just say this quickly, that, you know, SAFO does not account for pre-K.
Correct.
Sound like a broken record. We still need to fix that. I'm hoping with the changes at the county level, we will get that addressed finally. The question I had is the question I emailed earlier, which is we had a pilot engineering program at Orange High School that originally we said we were going to limit it to just Orange High School. And we wanted to open it up to all the district. And, you know, I saw we were saying, hey, the IB program at Cedar Ridge, are we going to advertise that engineering program to the broader district now, or is that program still in pilot? I'm asking that in context of open and closed and, you know, and that thought. So any updates on that program?
Yes, so I did look into that, Mr. Atherton, once you raised that question. And as you know, there are plenty of different programs and aspects of Orange County schools that I'm still learning. And so the context that I've received in regards to this particular program is that it is closed, and it's currently still closed. And part of the reason why we weren't opening it yet is we're trying to stabilize it a little bit more. We've had some turnaround with teaching staff, and you know, so we're trying to strengthen the program more before we open it up. But again, this is one of those programs that we will definitely review as part of the strategic planning and revisiting our choice programs. And but there is some need for staffing and making it a more stable program before we open it up. So I would say that it's still in pilot status.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hauser?
So just on SAFO, you might want to check this, but I'm pretty sure that SAFO doesn't include MEVN either. So as MEVN, because MEVN, so as MEVN adds hundreds of new homes, they're not notifying Orange County or asking for permission. So you may need to, is there a way for us to at least know what's coming? Because there's all that F1 Cheeks, all those families are coming in from MEVN zoning jurisdiction, not Orange County.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if someone was gonna.
I was gonna.
Ms. Doyle?
Just to piggyback on what Ms. Hauser was saying, there is a part of MEVN that's a MEVN address, but still in Orange County and still in Orange County School District. So there is a point of overlap that is of concern with that.
Yeah, Ms. Doyle, just to clarify, yes, that's exactly, it's MEVN is, City of MEVN or MEVN's ETJ is in Orange County. The kids go to our schools, but MEVN, as I understand it, does not participate in SAFO. So when they approve homes, Orange County has no say in it. I'm not even sure if we're notified.
Mr. Atherton?
Yeah, I was just going to say, for people trying to follow along on this discussion, what everybody's talking about is Orange County gets projection of growth, and that does not include MEVN's projection of growth. And so we have this large area that's growing that we do not get that projection included in the SAFOs. Therefore, when we're planning out, that's an unknown and could affect us and does affect us greatly. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Atherton. Ms. Doyle?
And I believe it's not just the projection, but the school district has to approve a development. So we're left out of the approval process in that area we're talking about as well.
Thank you.
We'll definitely inquire and ask about these items when we meet with SAFO.
Do we need a motion on this item?
I believe that we do.
Okay, so I move to approve the proposed open and closed schools for discretionary transfer.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Smiley and a second from Ms. Hauser. I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you, staff.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Board.
Dr. Dawson and Ms. Dodson for being here. The final item on our agenda this evening is policy committee recommendations. And I believe Ms. Cunningham Brown will be walking us through this.
Thank you, Chair McKenzie, board members. I'd like to share on first reading 3 policies and recommended updates. The first is policy 1750, grievance procedures for employees. I want to note 3 changes to this particular policy. Throughout the policy, it clarifies the terms used for the various actors in the grievance process. I want to call your attention to subsection B1. It adds a statement requiring parties to respect the confidentiality of personnel matters. And the third change to this policy is in subsection C1. It adds a sentence to address grievances against the superintendent. And on first reading, these are the changes that I'd like the board to consider for first reading with regards to policy 1750, grievance procedures for employees. The second policy for consideration this evening is policy 1760, prohibition against retaliation. The subsequent changes to this policy are as follows. It deletes references to a repealed policy in the second paragraph. And the second major change to this policy is in the second paragraph, it adds a statement that employees should use complaint procedures specific to the circumstances. Lastly, I'd like to share updates with regards to policy 5070, public records, requests, release, and disposition. The changes with regards to this particular policy, it adds a sentence to section A to reflect changes in the law requiring reporting received pursuant to statute 135(8)(f)(2)(f). We added an additional clarification of language to that particular sentence that reads as follows: of individuals who may be subject to an additional employer contribution upon retirement. And this is in reference on getting some context with regard to pension spiking. And lastly, for policy 5070, there are some updates with regards to the legal references. Those are the subsequent changes to policies 1750, 1760, and 5070 respectfully.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cunningham Brown. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I move the approval of the recommended policies for the first reading.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Stevens and a second from Ms. Doyle. Is there any discussion, Mr. Atherton?
Yeah, I just ask that the rescinding gets cleaned up as we normally do, just the header stuff. That's the only comment I have.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, I have a motion from Ms. Stevens and a second from Ms. Doyle. Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Well, those policy recommendations have been approved unanimously. Thank you, everyone, for an efficient and productive collaborative meeting. Dr. Felder, do you have any closing thoughts or comments before we motion to adjourn?
I do not, but thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Stevens and a second from Ms. Smiley. Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
We're adjourned. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.
8:11. Woo!